friends. Come along with me, see how the story ends. We are some hippies, these are my friends. Come along with me, see how the story ends.
Round 45.
If you only knew. If you only knew. Welcome back to another episode of Professional Hippies. Excited to be back with you guys. If you're new to us, if you're new to the channel, we like to bridge the gap between hippie woo-woo and professionalism, so everything from like market talk to self-help. And today we got a blast from the past, not really, but a long-awaited guest. Joey, how you doing, brother?
Doing very good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I just really appreciate the fact we got to do the intro like 3-4 times. So if anything, we'll have some bloopers on this episode, which had some technical difficulties, but that's all good, man. So let's just kind of bring it back. I mean, I think we were talking about just kind of the genesis of how you guys got where you're at. I mean, you just recently moved out. That's kind of, we've talked about that on the podcast before, but just kind of catch the listeners up to speed. Where are you at? What are you about?
So I started living with Dylon in college by chance. So I was living in a fraternity house, and my parents were horrified at what they saw. So they immediately pulled me out of there, and they just randomly selected an apartment near USF. And just the chance, his roommate moved out the week before, so I was able to snag that spot before anyone else. So then I moved in with him at an apartment near USF, and then lived with him there, and then another house near USF, and then we went separate ways, and then met up again after college, and then we both realized we wanted to move to St. Pete, and then we immediately linked up, moved to an apartment in St. Pete for about 3 years, and then lived with Dylon in his house for about 2 years. So, yeah, collectively, it's about like 7 years that we live together. So we're basically brothers at this point.
Yeah.
A lot of if walls could talk kind of things.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the reasons we're really excited to have you on is, I mean, honestly, your brain, dude. Like every time we've hung out, just the perspectives you have on things. And I think you'd be impressed to know how many times that Dylon and I reflect based off of the friendship that you have cultivated together, or you guys have cultivated together. Because, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We're all kind of growing in a similar route, like in a similar direction. But I'm just excited to have the chance to bring you on here and just kind of chop shop and talk about that. But first, just to apologize. I mean, knowing Dylon for 7 years, that's tough on anybody, you know?
Yeah, I guess I just got used to it, you know?
You have to.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, that Dylon's my baseline. So, like, anything after that is just like money, you know?
We found the red line a few times.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. So now that you're in your own place, because there is definitely like kind of like a transformation that occurs from when you go from living with your boy to living on your own. Like, how long have you been on your own now?
About 6 weeks. Yeah, man, the month leading up to moving out, and then the week of moving out, and the couple of weeks after that. Thankfully, I went on vacation with my girlfriend and my family right after that, so it kind of took my mind off it. But yeah, dude, those weeks leading up to it, and the week I finally did it was like really emotional for me. That was really, really tough. I was a lot of emotions. You know, I was definitely excited to finally get on my own because I always wanted to check that box for myself. But like the uncertainty, and also just like missing him and missing living here, and yeah, it was a really emotional time for me. But you know, reflecting back on that, I'm glad I did it, and it was a lot of necessary growth. Yeah, I definitely needed that to kind of reach like the next stage of my life. So
Good for you for like volunteering that. I think that's one of the hardest things about like moving into a new chapter in life, especially as a man, is just admitting like, hey, there's a lot of emotions that come up.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to admit my emotions.
Yeah, I mean, so like But once you get past that like 4 or 6 week mark, then you kind of settle into like the new era where you're like, okay, everybody talks up the being naked thing. I think it's just like not having to worry about anybody else, period thing.
Dude, I've barely been naked. I've like, but I've definitely embraced my new place. The first week was definitely weird. But dude, I've totally settled in, and like everything's fire in there. Like, I love it. Like, I've gotten the best sleep I've ever gotten in my life. and like you said, we were talking off the air, but I'm definitely like comfortable in silence. I can be by myself. I can be alone with my thoughts. I do have like a natural like introvert coloring to my personality. So yeah, I'm totally embracing being by myself.
Shred.
Till he shreds the guitar.
I was gonna say that's literally what I said. Shred. I was like, yeah, I mean, it's all cool. It's like there's one thing to be said for like having that camaraderie with your boy, like especially when Michael and I live together. But there's also another thing, like you got to have a relationship with yourself too.
Yeah.
And it's pretty tough to deepen that relationship with yourself when there's always someone in your space. I mean, is it possible? Yeah, for sure. But I think you look back on this as one of the most peaceful times in your life. That's for fucking sure, especially if a woman gets up in that shit.
Yeah, it's definitely been peaceful. But yeah, like you said, like definitely being comfortable with yourself, I think, is really important, like for anybody, because otherwise you're just going to be filling the void with distractions. And if you can't be comfortable by yourself, then like you're just not comfortable as a person. That's your square one. Like you need to have a solid foundation in your square one. Like you need to just be able to sit and meditate. Yeah. And if you can't do that, then you can't tell me that you're a happy person.
I can tell you I'm a happy person, but I can also tell you I really fucking struggle with sitting down and meditating, man. There was a thing from Sam Harris, just a dialogue where he expressed, if you're sitting in the waiting room for the dentist and you get bored, boredom is really just a sign of an untrained mind.
Yes.
And I love that because like now when I go and I'm like getting my oil changed or whatever, I feel like yesterday I went to go play disc golf and I'm just by myself and kind of observing shit, had a podcast on, and the service was pretty terrible. So like it took a moment for the podcast to load. And I just heard some nature, and I was like, oh, this is nice. Like, I'm just going to sit with this for a little bit. And it's dry as fuck out here, so, it's not, like, vibrant. It's all kind of dead and shit. And so you're just, like, kind of crunching along. It's hot. You're sweating. And you're like, hey, this is cool. I'm really grounded. And, like, 15 minutes later, you're like, this fucking sucks. I want a distraction, You just feel your little rat brain go crazy. But I'm with you, man. I mean, meditation is a great square. It's a great ground zero, if you will, for just finding some inner peace and cultivating that.
Yeah, and to touch on that, like the untrained mind part, I think I learned that probably from like Joe Rogan, is just filling your life with things you enjoy. So, I train martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specifically. I play guitar all the time when I'm home. I read, I journal. Like I research like financial stuff, like. So there's always something to be done. Like there's always something active that I can do, and even aside from that stuff, like I'll just go for a walk, like there's always things that I can fill my day with that I enjoy. And I've reflected on this a few times, but sometimes I actually forget what it feels like to be bored. I actually forget what that felt like because the last 2 to 3 years, I always have a drive to just be doing something. Like I always want to be learning something and just giving my mind something to chew on. Like if it's learning a new song or, reading a new book or like researching a new company or something. I'm always giving my mind something to chew on throughout the day.
He's one of the most regimented people I know, with like always something to do. Like once the hour ends, then all of a sudden there's something else to do. All right, we're done with that. Now we're going to move on to the next thing, all the way up to the point where he's going to bed.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
you know.
There's something to be said for that. I mean, having a schedule, like, that's something that I've always struggled with, but Atomic Habits, that guy's a big fan and believer, and so am I, of discipline creates freedom, right? So
yes, I was literally just thinking that.
yeah, I mean, when you have the ability to sit down, and especially when you see, like, guitar is a great example where that will come out and play. It's like, hey man, if you're consistently practicing that every day, allowing like your mood fluctuations to come and go, but allowing the action to take place, you're going to see a creative spirit really foster as a result of discipline. And those two, in my mind, like, we're always kind of opposite of each other, like always at war, creativity and discipline.
Well, credit to Dylan for putting up with my 10,000 hours of shitty guitar playing before it actually started sounding good.
Dude,
so thank you very much for that patience.
It was interesting, really going from where he was at and really listening to, like, really just practicing chords all the way up to just hearing the blues, you know, all of a sudden, before he's moving out, you know, really, you know, being able to be like, hey, play this, and he could, you know, kind of pick it up, or giving him a song, you know, he might not have practiced it, but he can hear it and get a little, you know, get pretty good at it pretty quickly. So that was, you know, and hearing something that he's been practicing, let's say over 5 years, in the beginning, just hearing it sound like shit to now being smooth and crisp. That was pretty neat. You know, it got me excited to even want to pick it up, and just because of, like, oh, if you put in the process, this is what it turns into. Yeah, it was pretty neat. Like hearing that process.
It's incredibly satisfying, man. Like, I remember even, like, growing up, like, I always wanted to be able to play. I always idolized, like, guitar players and stuff. And it's really weird that I wouldn't say I've come full circle. I'm not a master or anything, but if I were a kid listening to me play now, I would be amazed. Like, there's songs that I can play now. When I was a kid, like 12 years old, I'd be like, man, if I could just learn how to do that, if I could just play that Jimi Hendrix song, I'll be happy. And I literally I played that for my girlfriend last week, and just effortlessly. And I reflected on that after I was done, like, oh my God, I'd be so happy with myself. Like, if my 12-year-old self saw that, like, his mind would have been blown. And so, yeah, it's incredibly satisfying, and that extends to more than just, like, playing guitar, but, like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like I mentioned, and even just, like, fitness, like getting your body in good shape and, like, getting that momentum there. It's like when you finally get that momentum, it's not even like an active thought, and you just, like, breathe it. It's just like one day, like every day, I'm just going to go train, or I'm going to go work out, or I'm going to play guitar. And it's like, you just breathe it. You know what I mean? That fluidity, it just kind of flows out of you. And that's really what's most satisfying about it at all, is that I don't really even have to try anymore. It's just a part of me.
Was there a point when you were integrating these parts, though, that you felt a lot of resistance? I mean, a lot of the stuff you just described is really healthy habits, right? So, I mean, come on. Like, there's got to be a point where you're like, I don't feel like playing today. I don't want to go train.
Oh, totally, dude. Yeah, that's a daily thing. Yeah, there's, like, I'm making the decision to do it. You know, there's always, like, 5% of me that's like, but, yeah, some weeks are better than others. I mean, and some days are better than others. You know, sometimes, I guess sometimes on my mood, I just don't want to do it, but making the decision to do it daily, that's where the freedom comes from.
What do you do when you don't feel like doing it?
Netflix.
Or video games. It's been a long time. I miss your PS5.
Oh yeah, that's right. I was using this PS4 for a while. All of a sudden, you know, Christy gifts me with a PS5, and all of a sudden everything switches over.
I'm scared to think about what would happen if we got one of those in our household. I've got a strict no consoles in our house. I mean, I got this fucking DJ, man. I love playing music on there, and I don't hardly ever do it anymore. You know?
Well, that's why I think you always say you would get addicted to the PlayStation, right? But like, I thought the same thing, but I have so much going on, I forget that I even have it sometimes. And then when I get to that point where I'm like, oh, I have nothing to do tonight, then I'll jump onto it. But I thought the same thing. I'd be like, oh, I'm going to get addicted to it and play it all the time. But I think you would play DJing over a PlayStation any day, and you don't even do that as much.
I think there's an element of self-awareness here that I can invite where it gets ugly. I get way too competitive, and it's just not healthy. It's just I've seen it play out way too many times. Where
You're just going to get one of those games where it's just blood and murder, and you're like, blood and murder, blood and murder.
What gets me is the ones like FIFA or like Madden, because God forbid you have like a close loss and you're like, I know exactly what I did wrong. And then you're like, I just one more game. Like the 23-minute games where you can fit in almost like 4 games an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where you get fucked up.
Dude, you're telling me when I was a kid, my favorite game was like college football, like NCAA football 2003 or 4 or whatever it was. Dude, I can't tell you how many controllers I smashed into pieces because I was so furious that my Miami Hurricanes that had like 99 stats for every player lost to some bullshit team. Like, dude, my dad bought like 100 controllers for me.
I could see that so much.
I can't see that at all. You don't come across as that guy. You're cool, calm, collected.
Well,
maybe you get all the rage
earlier
out
he
of
was
the
like,
child.
I just meditate. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, just meditate. Your dad came in, just meditate, son. He's like, fuck this. Just slams it. I just don't see that. That's so funny.
What's funny, and my dad is a Buddhist too. He is a practicing Buddhist. And he'd just be like,
shit.
I can't believe what's coming out of my son right now.
Out of here.
Yeah, he teaches mindfulness meditation over in Tampa.
How about that? That's too cool, man.
Yeah.
I didn't know that at all. Wow. Okay, now I understand like the sense of stoicism. Maybe I mean maybe that wasn't departed on you. Maybe that's in a later sense. But
Dude, I'm so glad you said that word because I'm in a stoicism rabbit hole.
you getting a stoic boner?
I just major one, yeah. I just finished Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and that is like that's one of the best books I've ever read. It's probably the most impactful book I've ever read.
It's a big claim.
Not at first glance, but I started listening to like the Daily Stoic podcast, and then listening to that alongside reading it. Like I've already reread a bunch of passages a bunch of times, and now I'm reading Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. And I'm in a huge like stoicism rabbit hole. I really, really love the philosophy. It's like literally everything we've just been talking about. It's like it's actively deciding each moment to live a virtuous life and to incrementally get better every day.
Yeah.
That's stoicism.
What I really liked about the Stoics is that, if I'm not mistaken, which I'm pretty certain on this, that they were like quite literally at the pinnacle. I mean, these are, like people look at someone like a Da Vinci, so like a Renaissance man, right? Where they were willing to take a step back at some pivotal moment in their life, typically a decade or less or more, somewhere around that benchmark, and go, hey, I want to reinvent myself. Whereas the Stoics, I mean, these were guys that were warriors, high-level merchants, just practitioners of a lot of different arts. So, like, when you look at the triangle, I mean, they were at the very tippy top. So they weren't just, like, philosophers giving out some kind of advice. Like, these were guys that they would kind of be equivalent to, like Elon if he was fucking ripped, giving some advice.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Aurelius was literally the emperor of Rome. He was an emperor philosopher. He had like the world at his fingertips. He had like unattainable wealth, but he was like one of the most enlightened people on the planet as well. And that's why I think it's one of the best books ever written, because that book are his private thoughts. It was never intended to be a book. So you're literally reading the private thoughts of like one of the most complete human beings And one of the most underrated human beings in human history, in my opinion.
Underrated?
Underrated.
I mean, where are you going to put him? Top 10? Top 100?
Yeah, easy. Top 10.
A lot of humans came through. You know that, right?
A few, yeah.
That's cool. I'm gonna have to check that out. I didn't actually know it. So was this more of like a distilling practice? He was writing for himself, kind of like journaling, and him trying to maybe like distill his thoughts onto paper, or how did this catalog come to be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a Stoic practice. Like, you can't be a Stoic without journaling. Every major Stoic journaled. You know, you have to review your day. You have to take an honest look at your day. Yeah, that's literally every morning he would get up and just write down his thoughts. At the end of the day, write down his thoughts. And yeah, highly recommend that book.
What was the name of it again?
Is that like you're just judging yourself throughout the day, what your day was like and how you can improve on that?
Yeah, it's just like,
is that what that is?
This happened and
Okay.
I'm feeling this way, or he'd reflect on something, like he's reflecting on his death, or he's, reflecting on, all these people are being assholes, like how you should treat people, like not being able to control what happens to you, but being able to control how you react to it. That's like a huge part of that book.
It's kind of like what people have come along, where they have like a thought process that comes along during the day, right? And then they just think about it. They're like, oh yeah, that's right, I should do that. And then they just forget about it. And I guess that's a way better way to record and reflect back on it. If that situation comes up down the road, you know how to what you thought how it should be done. It's like a dictionary. Instead of looking at words, how to solve problems.
Yeah, it's like a really effective way to learn too. It's just like the practice of like writing it and like feeling the thought flow through your hand and onto the paper. It's just like there's something about it that just makes you learn it like 10 times better.
Yeah.
How many of like those journals you think got lost in the Library of Alexander?
I don't even want to think about it. That's like the biggest crime against humanity, was like the burning of that library.
All those scholars that were doing that, gone.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one of the
That's why you're
interesting
doing
things
it.
about kind of oral history as well, is that like when you just take a zoomed out approach at humanity, and they kind of start to pull at these threads of like, for eons, that's how we just passed information, was orally. So it was like looking between the lines of the story, and it's like, all right, what's the moral here? What's the message? Not necessarily what's the delivery mechanism, but a lot of conspiracy theories kind of run with this as well, where we talk about, hey, like floods, things coming from space. Like, these are all parables that have been passed down generation to generation. And I want to say, I'm going to have to chew on this thought, that there was a civilization that did a remarkable job of passing down information. I learned from a podcast recently. It was really well documented. But regardless, I mean, that is just kind of the fun part about transcribing something to paper, right? Because it's literal, versus passing information orally, because there's the telephone game, right? So you got to make this really fun story, have it really detailed, but also there has to be like a skeleton that can't be fucked up. So that's kind of one of the fun things about human history, is that there's stuff that like we take very literally that was meant to be interpreted. Like, it was meant to be deciphered, not taken as literal. Hinting at a book, of course, here, but you kind of pick my drift,
Well, yeah, you're talking about the Bible.
Right,
there's so many different translations, and so many different, like, even just telling the story, like in certain kings wanted certain details to be taken out and stuff like that. So it's just, it's amazing how things have changed over time. The same story could change so much over time.
Yeah, or even as you're talking about that, when we talk about how much history was lost in the burning of that library, I mean, just think about, Dylan, didn't we talk about this on one podcast? I think we got pretty ripped when we were talking about it. If everything was deceased, like if we had a gray sky, like we had, I don't remember what the cataclysmic number is for nukes. I think it's somewhere around like 17 of like the big boys go off. We create like this gray cloud cover that creates like a new ice age, something, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say, okay, we kill off all the humans. How long until there's really no record or evidence that we were here? Like, what is that, 50,000 years? 20,000 years? I mean, skyscrapers aren't.
I was thinking about this yesterday on that, like on the recording, like music, right? So I was thinking about Spotify, and every time a music is played, right, the digital impact on that music being played wears a little bit more. And I was wondering, like, how often, of course, people are playing it, but then let's say we lose the digital route, right? So you lose the digital route with Spotify or Apple Music. Now you're left with records, but then all of a sudden those records are played over and over again. Eventually they start skipping and everything starts going, and eventually things just start depleting, right? So like there's literally nothing that can last forever. And how long does that take for it to be gone? And the only thing that can last forever as the longest are the stones, right? So that's why we have like the Sphinx that's still there, one of the oldest things on Earth, I would say, that's man-made.
Mm-hmm.
But even that has a ton of water erosion, you know? I mean, there's a lot of contention, like what the actual dating of those artifacts are, whether that was like Graham Hancock talks about, like that was maybe 10,000 or 11, like during like that big cataclysmic event. Or is it really, as they say, like, what is it, 4,000 years ago is like the general consensus?
Somewhere between 2 and 4.
The Egyptology consensus. Yeah. So, but even something like that's like maybe 3, or if you believe in Graham Hancock, like 10,000 years ago, even that already has a bunch of water erosion. So like that won't last forever either, you know? Everything's always changing.
Well, right now, what they're looking to do, some scientists are looking to store a lot of information in DNA, which is pretty cool. So, like silica right now, I mean, is a great store of information. They're in the northern seed vaults. Have you guys heard about the seed vaults?
No.
Yeah. So, like, if an apocalyptic event happens, like all the nations, like there's this international treaty. I mean, we're talking Russia, everybody donates to the seed vault to protect seeds in case we have an apocalyptic event, that we can kind of like, you know, pull these guys out and regerminate them and things like that. So in the seed vault, we also have some other like silica records, so we can store incredible amounts of information. We can cold store this information onto these records. And so it's some of the brightest minds are very driven to help us preserve what we have, but it's also kind of like this fool's paradox of, I mean, for how long and for what purpose, right? Like, even if it's there, how do we know, right? Like the elements are going to take all, like the earth reclaims all, you know? So like I was at Red Rocks not too long ago, and somebody was bringing up like littering. And I was like, the earth doesn't care, man. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, the earth doesn't give a fuck. And he was like, no, like save the planet. And I was like, bitch, save yourself. Save the humans. It ain't save the planet. The planet was here before you got here. It's going to be here after. Don't worry about the planet. Worry about you, bitch. And he was like, oh, shit, you're right. I was like, we're trying to save ourselves, motherfucker. This is save your beachfront property. This ain't save the planet.
Toss that beer can, man.
Yeah, dude. Motherfucker throwing a balloon around. I'm like, hey, gotta kill a turtle somewhere.
It was interesting when we were in Hawaii, and it was talking about how the islands are formed, right? There's a hot spot that's forming the islands, and then the island moves off the hot spot. So now it's starting to form another island. Well, you know, let's say there's 4 or 5 islands out there right now. There were other islands before, and they've just eroded away, and now they're underwater. Yeah. You know? So now how many times has that happened in the past? Or how many more times is going to happen with, like, let's say Pangea, there was that, and all that landmass that maybe civilizations were built on are now underwater. I wonder how much civilization's underwater.
Atlantis.
Because of that. Atlantis.
Or is Atlantis in Antarctica under a bunch of ice? Or, you know what I mean? Like, what's under all that ice? what's at the bottom of the ocean. Like how much have we actually mapped of the ocean floor?
A fair amount.
You know what I mean?
Actually, fair amount. So people want to say like, hey, like 4 to 14%, something like that, right? Because but there's also ways that we can peer into the ocean, and hey, maybe we're not mapping it directly, but like we do have an ability to predict within a certain sense where things are. It's also like saying like, how much of the Sahara have we mapped? Which sure, we have satellites. We mapped all of it, so it's not necessarily a fair comparison. But when it's a desolate wasteland, which is what most of the ocean is, a lot of people want to give credence to the fantasy, the idea of like, well, just because we haven't mapped it. I mean, it's like, I'll play into that. I'm with it.
But I guess how much of it's under the sand in the ocean, right? Like, so think about South America, how much we haven't discovered there until now that we have LiDAR to be able to see underneath everything. So how much of the ocean has been mapped using LiDAR to see what's underneath everything? So I think that might be what they're talking about.
I mean, so here's the difference, right? So when we talk about detailed imaging and mapping, the commercial fisherman is not mapping the sea floor when they're trolling, right? So
they're dragging
they're just doing
shit
fucking drag nets
out of it.
So these guys know where fishing populations are. They know where like crustacean population are. They know where shit's at, right? Because like we know where currents flow. So like that's the only piece of information I like to introduce into that, is that we don't need to fucking map the Mojave Desert to know that there's sand there, right? Like these guys, there's a certain general consensus.
Oh shit, there is.
We've laid enough work over the ocean to know where like a lot of stuff is. So mapped maybe 4%, 14%. Understood, I would say probably 60%. Right? I think like
there's water and fish out there.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I don't know.
It's pretty dark.
And the Titanic.
And I'm saying all of that is a layman, man. So I could be corrected so fucking hard if a marine biologist came on right now, right? Like, I mean, I'm not taking any kind of pretense to that, but I think it's also just like, hey, there's a kind of a nuance in everything, and especially in that, it's like, I don't know. I mean, what are you gonna do, right? We're gonna go out there and fucking find Atlantis.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, that'd be cool.
Let's do that.
Yeah. No,
next weekend.
My comment that I wanted to itch at was Occam's razor, right? The idea that, hey, the simplest answer is probably the right answer. And so when it comes to something like Pangea, when people try to deny something like Pangea, it's like, well, my left hand looks like my right hand, so I'm going to assume that these are my hands, right? It's like, yeah, this is not fucking spaghetti noodles. You know what I'm saying? So
that's one way to put it.
Some people,
Depends.
they look at South America and they look at Africa and they go, coincidence. Or they look at the Gulf of Mexico and they're like, no, that probably just sunk on its own. Definitely not a meteor. But and over and over and over again, you just smush them to fucking together, and you're like, no, that looks like it all was together at one point. Like, that's Occam's razor, right? Like, the simple answer is probably the right answer. So I just get really frustrated when people are like, no, God created it that way. I'm like, okay, sure, yeah, no.
2,000 years ago.
6,000 years ago.
That's all. Well, to do a nice segue, how about that Amazon earnings call today?
Dude.
How they saved the market. Go from ocean to our Lord and Savior,
Did
Jeff
all the earnings
Bezos.
reports come out today? Is that what the market jumped 100%?
There's a few things going on. The biggest thing is that Jerome Powell came out yesterday and he hinted that they're going to pause rate hikes eventually. And by eventually, I mean within the next couple of months. The Fed loves to do this. Like, they love to just come out and they like to hint at what they're going to do to kind of show their hand so that they can let the markets kind of do the work for them.
Right.
So
it's not a shock to the system.
Exactly, because they don't want to be blamed for the drawdowns. They don't want to be blamed for the blood for it. So it's really kind of genius. Like they have like a bunch of voting members. They go on to CNBC or Powell in his press conferences after the meetings. You know, he'll just like he'll slip in a comment like, oh yeah, you know, I kind of want to see this, and if I see that, then maybe we'll slow down the rate hikes. And that's really the biggest reason why we've had such a big drawdown this year in stocks, is because investors didn't know how many rate hikes were going to come this year.
Yeah.
And they didn't know how bad inflation was going to be. And I mean, we've seen the inflation, and we've seen a lot of the hikes, but there was still uncertainty as far as how far the hikes were going to go, because the fundamental tool that investors use to calculate companies' cash flows in the future, like on a discounted cash flow, is with the Fed's fund rate. So if you are uncertain how far or how high that's going to go, your investors want to protect themselves to the downside, and so they're going to overestimate and overcorrect, right? So they're going to sell more aggressively. The one thing that the market hates more than anything is uncertainty.
I was going to steal it right out of your mouth. Hey, before we talk about uncertainty more, can you guys debate on what the best condiment is? I'm going to go get a beer real quick.
That's why you always bring it two.
Maybe honey mustard.
Oh, we had a whole episode once about the rating mayonnaise. I think the best one might be ranch. Ranch is a pretty solid one.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. You can go on a lot of things, but, you know, you got to be a little classier than that. You can't put, like, ranch on a steak, you know. You got to be a human being.
I mean, you said honey mustard. Can you put,
yeah, you can't do that either.
But you can't put A1 sauce on everything.
That's true.
But, like, then again, some people would argue, if you do have to put sauce on the steak, is the steak even good?
Oh, God. I had the best steak the other night.
Yeah, you know, I don't put sauce on steak.
I try not to, but sometimes it's pretty good. Like if you go to a steakhouse and they have their own steak sauce.
Like Burns or something.
Yeah. Steakhouse.
All right, we're back in it. Yeah, I didn't check the earnings.
He said honey mustard, by the way. His favorite one.
That's just the first thing that came to mind.
Is that your favorite? That's your go-to? Definitely not versatile, but very powerful.
Chicken fingers.
Oh, dude.
Bam.
Some honey mustard on some chicken fingers? What are you talking about, baby? Get out of here.
The festival go-to for me. It's either a Euro or chicken fingers and honey mustard.
No, but I do want to talk about the market,
Where I
seriously,
like to go.
because I think right now it's kind of like I've been watching a lot of talking heads, you know, people I really respect. And one of the things that I love that's kind of this general consensus, this theme that's coming out, is that no one recession looks like the last or previous recessions, although that's how we like to model them. And so right now we have record unemployment. So like unemployment's really low. Inflation's really high. We have an incredible amount of demand for housing, but the supply is getting shorted. The interest rates are going up. So it's like, dude, this tension is unreal. And like, we don't know what fucking direction this is going to go. Everybody, I think what the government is hoping for and the Fed is hoping for is just kind of like a freeze, just like a stabilization. Because like
soft landing,
like the inflation has to we're going to see that reflected in the market. You know, when's the last time we had deflation? Does that historically ever happen?
Maybe in like the 40s, like after, because like the market's completely collapsed. Well, in the 30s after the Great Depression, and maybe
Does deflation
you can argue that this
because money's not moving at that point, right?
No, I mean, you can argue like any massive technological shift technology causes deflation. You know, if you can make things more efficient for a business, that drives the cost for the business down, and that, you know, that creates deflation. So that's kind of Kathy Wood's whole thesis, is like she invests behind like innovative companies, and I think she overestimates the role of deflation. I think she might be right, but I think she's 10 years early or 20 years early.
I mean, most predictions are, right? Like that's like the one thing that's certain. I was looking for the book really quickly when I was reaching for a brewski. I'm gonna pull it up, but like it's kind of the idea behind what I expressed earlier is that no recession looks like the next recession. So like what happened to 08, that is not a benchmarker for what's going to happen again. Like that's just that's trying to predict hurricanes with the past hurricanes. Like that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
Right. It'll let you know shit's going to get fucked up. And right now I think the general consensus is shit's going to get fucked up. We got a lot of people overexposed, especially a lot of companies.
It was interesting hearing like the CEO of BlackRock come out several months ago, and he was like, "Y'all, everyone," he was saying, "Everyone, get ready because we're about to see something we've never seen before."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just the fact that the Fed is tightening into a natural economic slowdown, and the fact that the United States, who's the creditor of the world, has like 130% debt to GDP ratio. Like the reason why we got out of the 70s was because we had like a 30% debt to GDP ratio. And so if you listen to like a bunch of Bitcoiners, they'll say, you know, this is obviously not sustainable and, you know, you're just going to inflate your dollars away. Like there's no hard money anymore. Once we went off the gold standard in 71, you know, the currency has just been debased ever since. Like I think we've lost like 99% of our purchasing power since the dollar actually became the world reserve currency. Wow. 99%.
But the thing I love to bring that back.
What is it?
I'm a big proponent for crypto. I think I'm really bullish on it, and regardless, I mean, where I stand on a lot of stuff, the thing that backs the currency and the reason why like the dollar is kind of the mainstay, in my opinion, tanks. I mean, it's really just faith, right? Faith in our tanks. But
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's like people want to bitch about how much we spend on the military, me included. You want to talk about a dumpster fire of fucking resources. God bless. It's amazing how fast our military can burn money. But what we get in exchange for that is power, influence, right? Like no one wants to talk about our satellite states, you know, and how many embassies we have set up, how many forward operating bases we have all across the globe. All the shit that's going on in Russia right now, the only reason they got a fucking tight sphincter is because of us, right? I mean, yeah, sure, NATO, but what's in NATO? Us, right? So like what's backing all of this credit? It's our GDP. And it's just astounding to me that our GDP outperforms somewhere like China, where they've got us quadrupled up on just people, on bodies. And so somehow our ability to innovate, to stay ahead of some kind of technology curve, some kind of efficiency curve, some ability to ideate our way out of problems has kept us at the center of the breadbasket of the world, like gluing this whole motherfucker together. But I would side with the crypto guys and say like, hey man, this isn't, you can't just keep punting. You know, at some point there's going to be some kind of repercussion.
Yeah, and that's why I treat my Bitcoin as just a hedge. Like that is my hedge for all shit hits the fan, and then everybody looks for a new reserve currency. Like I think that's a very real possibility. And going back to what you were saying about like China, you know, at least in America we have like a semblance of a free market. Like there's manipulation behind the scenes, but you never want to bet against America. That's why like I love our stock market, and we're such an engine for growth. Like China, even though they have like how many times the amount of people we do, they will never be us. They will only ever be able to steal our good ideas because they don't believe in free markets, and that growth will just never naturally occur there. And I think ultimately we will prevail. Like I don't think China will ever be like the leading power or the lead reserve currency. I think America will remain that.
I'm going to say this now, and hopefully my kids get to hear it. I think they will. And here's why. I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be a massive civil unrest. I think there's going to be a civil war, not between the people, but between the machine that is their governing body and the people. There's going to be a massive uprising, and that rift is going to allow some kind of free market to come forward. There's going to be some kind of freeing renaissance. We've seen this happen over and over and over again in empires throughout the world's history, where at some point something gives, a levee gives. There's a crack in the facade of the power. And that's what China is, right? It's this illusion of legacy, respecting elders, respecting power, respecting who we are. You know, like this elusive, this ethereal governing body above them. You know, whether it's the government or whether it's like family tradition and history, I think at some point that's going to give. And that's going to be the thing that allows the people to, once all of that bullshit settles, they're really smart. They're really driven, right? And I mean, that's just kind of my outlook is that, hey, empires come and go. And I think what America is doing is just not sustainable on a lot of fronts, you know? And so I think in my lifetime, I don't see that happening, right? But eventually, I do see how hungry they are as a civilization. It's just a people, as a commonwealth, something giving. Like you kind of see it with the tension with Taiwan right now, you know, and you saw a lot with like, was it Tokyo? That they had a lot of the bullshit going down with the protests and stuff like that, or Hong Kong,
Beijing,
Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Hong Kong.
I mean, there's a lot of people that, I mean, but then you also, to counter that, right, to play my own devil's advocate, you have things like, was it the WeChat? Like the social currency that they have going on. So it's not like the government's stupid, right?
Mm-hmm. The digital one.
Like they also are tracking all of the people for a fucking reason, right? They're putting this social currency system in place for a reason. So AI is another thing to wade into this, right? How that's going to influence the markets. You know, so whatever it is that is going to be either the thing that cements America's legacy or the thing that destabilizes it is going to be something we don't know. It's not on our radar right now. Like that's probably the only thing I would hedge a bet against.
It's all they were putting tanks in front of their national banks because people were trying to make a run on the banks to get their money out.
Yep, saw that.
Who was?
That's what China did. Yeah, the people
When?
did. That's how we went to the Great Depression.
Last week,
yeah.
What?
Yeah. They were having to put tanks out in the military to keep people from going in and pulling it out.
Why were people making a run on the banks?
Protests.
Yeah, and that's just what happens like during liquidity crisis, right? Like their real estate market was melting down.
I've heard about the real estate. I didn't hear anything about people like, that's like hyperinflation status.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what's starting to happen over there is that the government's kind of really starting to lose control on their governance over things. I mean, exactly what we were just talking about, what could be happening, could already be happening. Yeah. You know?
I mean, the Mike Baker, he's the guy I really respect. I got introduced to him through the Rogan podcast and been following some of his stuff. Like, one of the things that I loved, I mean, you're talking about a guy. Do you guys know Mike Baker? Have you heard? Yeah,
sure.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I love about his outlook is after having such a tenured experience in the government is talking about the government as an entity, as a machine, right? So when we see stuff happen like under any presidency, that's just a great example of like, that's a figurehead, but that bitch can go. Like the machine doesn't give a fuck, right? Like, so like anybody that gets out of line of what the machine wants, like the machine doesn't care. You know what I mean? Like it's an entity in itself. Like people like a corporation is an entity for a reason. Like it has like its own, it has its own drive, it has its own influence, right? And so that's one of the things that I find really interesting about government. Like in China, now that they're getting kind of shaky, like that entity doesn't know how to shift, right? Well, the people are the fuel. The people are the power. So if the people lose faith in the machine, they say, fuck this tractor. I want that one, right? That one works. This one sucks. So like once the people get all shifty, that's when the machine gets like, what do we do, right? What levers do we start smashing, you know? So That's interesting. I didn't hear about that. Well, putting tanks in front of a bank, I mean, that's one way to control your people, I guess, right?
It's one way to do it.
What do you got?
I wonder what if their like economy is, you know, their stock markets are humming as good as ours are.
Oh, their stock market's terrible.
Is it?
Like in comparison to ours, it will always be like head and shoulders below us. It will never be. They will never have our level of stock market because we have much more of a free market. You know, we have the best. We have the best businesses in the world that have the best products in the world. You know, we have the best customer base in the world. You can't.
I was just hearing Trump
whatsoever.
right there. That was just some good old patriotic shit right there, Sean.
Yeah.
No, it's
How many markets are there? Like there's China's, ours,
Japan, Britain, UK stock market.
Saudi
I did see
Arabia.
last week Russia and China just
No.
formed a new world reserve currency.
Russia had one. I saw a blurb about that. I didn't read it, but you know, that's funny. Like a lot of Bitcoiners have been theorizing that too, as are they trying to create like a commodity backed currency, like backed by oil or backed by gold?
I mean, one thing that's definitely happening is in the resource market, all of the countries that were dependent on that titty are realizing they need to be independent. And so if you don't have the natural resources to be independent, well, you're going to turn to renewable resources, right? Because nearly every single country qualifies for renewables. And so you could see a really big push over the next decade of countries just kind of like, and until you have the incentive for this thing, it doesn't make sense. Like that's always been the argument, right? Is that like, you know, it's just tough. It's just not on front burner kind of action. Right now is kind of a great example where the countries are feeling the sting of being dependent on another country. And so like, hey, you know, now it's probably moving up the docket a bit where it's like, what can we do to offset this? If not being completely independent, like really mitigate that so that we can put this in a nominal range if something like this was to happen again, where we only see like a 30-40% surge instead of something that's just plain not doable, right?
Yeah, I think nuclear power is going to have a huge resurgence. Like Germany, I think, reported that they're going to have 3 new power plants that are going to be online within 6 weeks, all because of this war in Ukraine and realizing like their green agenda backed them into a corner. You know, they're so militant on their green agenda that even Trump like told them to their face, like, why are you allowing yourself to be so dependent on this one entity for oil? And they shut down like all their nuclear power plants. But I read somewhere that they're going to have 3 plants operational within the next couple of months. And that definitely makes me worry a little less.
What makes me worry is how many nuclear power plants we have that are like from the 60s. Did you guys know that?
Do we have a bunch?
We have some old nuclear power plants. Like that's a big thing. Well, it's infrastructure in America in a nutshell. I mean, and most of our infrastructure problems come from when we originally created interstates. So like when we were like, hey, you know, we need to create some kind of like federalized program. So like the interstates are, those are maintained by the federal government. Right. So they pass down funds to the state and they're like, hey, just make sure the interstates get fixed. Right. Another fun fact, interstates were originally straight and we had to fix them. We had to make them a little swingy because people kept falling asleep at the wheel. But same thing with bridge. So bridges, we have a lot of old bridges that need to be maintained. I mean, it's like the bill, when I learned this in logistics class, like the bill for updating our infrastructure in America is like something outlandish, like $500 billion, a couple $100 billion. I mean, it's just unreal. But so nuclear power plants are just really outdated. Those kind of fall under the infrastructure conglomerate. Like they still work. So we're like, fuck it. I mean, cost benefit analysis.
My grandfather said one of the most stable jobs in America is the civil engineer on interstates and roads because they'll widen all the lanes, right? And then all that road that you widen it at the very beginning is another bottleneck where you haven't widened it yet. So So it's just a constant widening and bottlenecking and just restarting. He's like, it was the best job I could ever get into.
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to have to worry about it, you know? I mean, I don't know, Joey, like, what do you think? I mean, what do you kind of see coming down the pipe over the next 5 years? Or what are you invested in right now? What's your portfolio look like?
So my stock portfolio is Tesla, Amazon, Apple, AMD, and KKR. So KKR is basically the number 2 private equity firm in the world, behind BlackRock. So that was just to give me kind of really broad exposure to, you know, a lot of global and emerging markets and U.S. markets too. But yeah, so I invest behind innovation, but I also invest behind strong cash flows and good management. So I think, and I also own NVIDIA in an IRA, in a separate IRA. And then for my crypto, I also own Bitcoin and Ethereum, because I really just don't see much else beyond those two. I think that's kind of all you really need to create like the entire crypto like ecosystem. But going back to stocks, I see, you know, healthy top and bottom line growth. You know, I see strong cash flow yielding, and I see them. They have great products, and they are attached to like every major growing trend in, you know, AI, robotics, but also great management and great management vision and decisions. So like, you know, you could have, you know, a good CEO, they might be able to envision great products, but if they don't know like capital discipline and how to manage the money, like it really doesn't mean much. So you need to have a good management team that knows when to do share buybacks, that knows when to reinvest into certain parts of the business, to know when to use their stock-based compensation, stuff like that. So every company I buy, like, I love the CEO. I love listening to their interviews, and I trust their vision for their company in the future.
So you take like a little bit more of an individualistic approach. I mean, you got like broad,
Yes.
like if you're investing into KKR, I mean, that's similar to like an index fund, but a little bit more, a little bit more specialized. Like those guys are taking a little bit more of an aggressive approach than investing in, say, like the S&P 500, something like that.
Yeah, and in my stock portfolio is like more, I mean, obviously I believe in those companies very much, but it's more speculative as compared to like my 401k. Like my 401k is literally just the S&P 500. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
And I'm obviously not a financial advisor. I just like to say that. This is opinions, not advice. Thank you very much.
When we last year in 2020, I mean, when the market really went down, that's when Joey and I were doing so much research. You know, we're locked inside. Let's just do a ton of research and see which companies to get into.
Yeah. Oh yeah, let me share this. So, my financial awakening was the COVID crash. So, throughout all my 20s, like, I was like completely financially illiterate. Like, I had a great job and a good salary, but like I was living paycheck to paycheck, bro. Like, I had a ton of credit card debt. I had a huge car payment. I had like nothing saved. Like I'm like, just what the fuck am I doing? You know what I mean? Like, and when COVID hit, I remember thinking like, holy shit, the world could fall apart. I could lose my job and I have nothing. And that was like the major kick in the ass I needed to like turn it all around. Like, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, dust yourself off, start saving money, start, you know, systematically pay off your credit card, get out of debt, lower your car payment, start investing. And then, you know, you just take one step at a time, day after day. And now, like, I'm in a totally different, like, financial reality.
What I love about that is, and I was thinking about this yesterday, so many people listening or watching this could feel like, hey, I'm past my prime. I'm in a place now where I have so much debt. I don't know what to do. There's no way out. You'd be fucking amazed what saving $20 a week can do. You'd be fucking amazed what setting $100 towards your credit card. Dylan, I remember, dude, when we first met, man, like that was kind of the outlook where you're like, hey, I'm like coaching on finances and also looking to really up my own financial game. And it's been so amazing to watch the progress. Like when you set intention to something, just because you're starting there, like we don't give enough credence to compound interest. Where it's like, hey, just do what you can where you're at. Yeah. And then who knows what the next year, 3 years, 5 years is going to hold. But I know what it feels like to be in a hole where you feel like even if you put down the shovel, it doesn't matter. You can't climb out. But if you at least put down the shovel, you give yourself a shot.
Like when you're scared to look at your bank account.
Isn't that the worst feeling?
Dude, that was the worst. And I lived with that every day.
No, worst. How about the text messages from Wells Fargo that
you've overdrawn?
Oh God, and they fucking penalize you $20 for it or $30 or whatever it is. However many.
Yep.
I remember calling the lady and begging for, I had like 5 or 6 of those overdrawn things, and she was like, "Yeah, you know what? We value as a customer, so we'll give you $150 back." And I had like $21 in my account, and that's what I got to eat with that week.
Yeah, and like at the start of COVID, like I mentioned, I had high credit card debt. I had a maxed out credit card, and they froze my card because like I missed a payment or two. So I made every financial mistake that you can think of. Like it's so funny. Like when it's like a paradigm shift when you go from financially illiterate to financially literate, you just look back and you go, what the fuck were you thinking? It's right in front of you. Like just you do the math, make your budget, figure out what each, what your groceries are going to be, what your gas is going to be, what your bills are. Do the math and just stick to it. It's like, you'd be amazed like how much you can grow and how many problems you can solve just with that.
Do you think financial discipline or physical working out discipline is easier?
Well, the physical discipline was easier because like I was training jiu-jitsu and I was in incredible shape, but I was broke as shit for the longest time.
I would side with that. I think financial is much more difficult. Like,
yeah.
If anybody's, still with us at this point and you're interested in what do I do? Like, I want to speak to the person that I was, say, 10 years ago. The lesson that I learned going through that hardship, because, Joe, you come off as a really disciplined man. Like, that's one thing that I revere about you, right? It's
Thank
like
you.
logicizing the reality you live in. And that's not the reality I live in. I live in a very emotional state most of the time. Like my moods grip my soul, especially when it comes to finances. So what I learned going through my winter, my dark side of the moon, was just under no circumstances will I spend more than I make. That's it. If you just fucking make more money than you spend, you'll be in a good spot. Like that's like you might start pretty break even, but what it's going to do is it's going to incentivize you creatively to figure out like what can I do to earn more money? Like do I need to value myself? Do I need to get a new position? Do I need to get a side hustle? Whatever. But if you just draw that line, you'll get so fucking frustrated because you'll realize like, hey, I'm worth more. I can do more. There's other possibilities to increase that. Where you get in trouble is when you think I deserve a treat. I need a reward. I need a break. I need a vacation. No, you fucking don't. You need to spend less money than you fucking made so that tomorrow you can feel good. You don't feel like you're in a fucking hole anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst part is, though,
it's a lifestyle change.
It is. Exactly.
Everything. It's a complete lifestyle. Like you're saying, you might need a vacation, but that doesn't mean going to Hawaii. That doesn't mean going to Miami. That means going to the park and relaxing, lay out in the sun for a bit.
I remember we went to
save some money.
What's that place in St. Pete, Park and Rec, right? With the yeah,
Park and Rec.
I remember I took Michael, or Michael and I went out there one night, and I got a drink inside. No, I got a drink outside first. I got a drink, same drink inside, and it was $3 more inside. And I waited 10 minutes
What?
for the bar. I kept waving her down, and she kept giving me dirty looks. And Michael's like, "Dude, it's $3. It's not a big deal." I was like, "No, I get it. It is $3." But I was like, it is a big deal." He's like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "No, it's the same fucking drink." So it's the principle. When it's not proportional, right? It's the difference of like, hey, you gotta have principles. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you're saving percentages, whatever. You got to look at the bottom line on fucking everything. So the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And so I was like, hey, why do I get charged more? And so I ended up getting the drink for free. So, but it's like, that doesn't matter. You got to have the fucking principle of like, look, where's your money going? You got to know where it's going. So in my opinion, I mean, that's kind of the first step.
And that's kind of like what I remember when I was trying to come through and save money. I really nailed down, like when I was trying to get in better shape too, where the money was going for food. Like what was the value I was getting back on the type of food I was spending money on. Like, all right, if I'm going to spend, I don't know, let's say $5 on a pack of shitty sugary stuff, or I can spend $5 a whole thing of grapes and a whole thing of apple. You know, how much more you could get out of it and healthier return.
Actually, that was like a really good pivot point for me, was that part of my budget was like deciding like, you know what, I'm going to meal prep every week, and I'm going to make salads for myself every week. And so that kind of helped my physical fitness too, is like, so now I know exactly what my budget is because I'm buying fucking spinach and chicken breast every goddamn week. And it's also, it's in two ways it's helping me. Like it's helping me, lose weight and, stay in shape and build muscle and all that good stuff. But I also know my budget, and because I buy the same fucking thing every week.
Yeah.
Exactly what I did.
Yeah, I mean, you start cooking for yourself. Like that was one of the biggest adjustments for me in college, where I just realized like, hey, like it just makes so much more sense to batch cook. And you start getting to working out. It's the same thing. Like you got to monitor your nutrition. But I mean, it's just easy for us. Like I wanted to reduce it to the simple, because it's really easy for anyone that's listening to go like, okay, like, well, that stuff that's not in my arena. It's like, hey man, just start where you're at. Like one of the books that I was talking about, the psychology of money. You read that?
Oh, I have it downloaded. I haven't started listening.
Great book.
I will.
Great book. I mean, so for me, one of the things that I held near and dear to my heart before I read the book, and just really cemented after, I don't give a fuck what your philosophy is around money. Just have one. Just have one. Right? It's like, hey, when you can define the sword that you want to fall on, you'll be ahead of 99% of the people in the world anyway. So whether you're like, hey, I ride or die on CDs, or savings bonds, like that's just what I think. Cool, man.
Yeah, you see, like everyone thinks there's like one way to do it or one way to look at money. But then if you ask the like top people in the world, like if you ask Jeff Bezos, you ask Warren Buffett, you ask Mark Zuckerberg, Elon, they all have a different view of money. Yeah. And how they got there completely. Like, I know we've talked about this before. Like, Colton, you've talked about, like, the system is built for a path, but you also customize it to how you want to live or how you want to get
like
there.
So many people get mad at, like,
well.
First off, billionaires. Like, people don't understand how the game works. Like, the reason why billionaires don't get taxed, well, they don't have any fucking money. All the money they have, it's all assets and loans, right? So they have a shit ton of companies or a shit ton of assets, right? They just call them assets, things. They have a lot of things, and they go to the bank and they say, hey, here are my things as collateral. I would like a loan against these things. And the bank goes, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
So they pay interest on the loan. So that's why they don't get taxed. But their things make them more money than the interest. So it's basically like that is the way. So like there is a game. You know, like people get so focused on Microsoft and Apple doing the shell game with Costa Rica and Scotland and, you know, these different banks and whatever. Like, sure, but the amount of fucking currency that is moving through the world is mind-boggling. That's not the thing to get hung up on, right? Don't direct your fucking energy being mad at these people. Direct your energy towards doing something for your fucking self. Learn the game, right? Like when I sold that house in Tampa and realized because I lived there 2 years, I didn't have to pay any tax on that money. Fucking nothing. I was like, what?
Well, because you rolled it into this new property?
No, I lived there 2 out of 5 years. Fucking
wow.
nothing. The spread was healthy too. And I was like,
damn.
What does that even mean? So, but let's say like, you know, if you bought a house, you put a lot of work into it, and let's say you turn around and you sell it for, you know, let's say you make $200,000 on the house. You busted your ass, a lot of sweat equity, and you make $200,000 in profit, and you do a 301c exchange. That's what you're talking about, rolling it into the next property. That's called a 301c exchange. So now you take that $200,000 and you buy a $500,000 home. So now you owe $300,000 on that home. Let's say you do some more work on that home. You do some more sweat equity, right? And you put 30 grand into it, whatever. I don't know. Now the house is worth 600 grand, but you owe 330. You can go to the bank, refinance that home, and now you can pull out that money and you can do whatever the fuck you want with it. You get a home equity line of credit. So now the bank's going to loan that to you. Say right now the national interest rate is about 5%. So yeah, hey, no problem, buddy. We'll give you a spread of 70%. So they're not going to give you the difference of 330 and 600,000. They'll give you 70% of that value. So it's 270. So they'll give you probably like what, 220,000? You do whatever the fuck you want with that 220,000. And now that is debt. So that counts against you on your taxes. So let's say that you're a W-2, a 1099, whatever the fuck, you make 150,000. You go, wait, but I got this big old debt over here. They go, oh, no problem. Don't worry about any taxes. Actually, we're going to give you money back. That is the fucking game.
Yeah, America. And to bring it back to America and China, I think America will always win because America incentivizes businesses and they incentivize investors. You know, just like you said, if you take out a bunch of debt, you won't get penalized for it. If you are trying to create a new business, you'll get a bunch of tax cuts. You know, if you file an LLC and you know, you report through an LLC, there's like a bunch of different tax breaks there. Like America rewards businesses.
People taking risks. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, let's land this plane, fellas. Dylan, what you got?
All right, everyone. Well, thanks for coming on, Joey.
Yeah,
I think we just really touched on the cover of like really getting into the stocks and really talking about a lot of other different things that like even in the beginning where we were talking about, I think we could even touch on that later, but
yeah, I'd love to come
I'd love to do like
for sure. We'll
Mad
definitely
Men
have you
series where we have like TVs behind us and have like the stocks going or something like the you know, the Kramer dude with the ball. He's like, yeah. Yeah, dude.
Awesome. Well, hope everyone enjoyed the episode. Share it with your friends. Share it with the ones that you love. Share it with the ones that you hate. Share it with your family, whoever you want. We appreciate you listening. Subscribe, follow, and we'll get you on the next one, guys.